Alright, so now that we've created the jacket front and we've created our facings, we're going to attach the facing to the jacket. Okay, so let's take our facing, put it aside for one moment. And here we have our jacket. This is the right side of our jacket. Down right there. Okay, so that's the right side of our jacket. We're going to take our facing, okay, and we're going to put right sides together. So here's the collar on my jacket, the notch and the lapel. Here is my facing, the collar, our notch, and our lapel. Flip it over and put right sides together. So right side of my facing to right side of my jacket. Line up your center back. You should have a notch there on your upper collar, which is attached to the facing, and you should have a seam there on the under collar, which is attached to the body of the jacket. Line those two up and go ahead and pin it on them together. Okay, and then you're just going to start pinning out in one direction. And you're going to pin down to where your collar attaches to, or to the lapel. Okay, and this where it's really important here that the stitching is perfect. Okay, that we stopped at our point E exactly, because that's when we stitch. We're going to stitch, come down, and stop right at that point again on the collar, and then same thing, we're going to come up the lapel and stop right there. So let's see. Okay. So that was my point E right there. So let's go and do the other side. Okay, I'm just going to pin my lapel together a little bit right here at the corner. And then work down. Pin it together at the waist first. And this is a pretty straight line, so you don't need a lot of pins. You can put one in if you want in between the two. And come around and do the same thing on the other side. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to stitch this all together. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start and I'm going to stitch right down to that point first. Okay, and I'll do the same thing here. I find that when you stitch to this point, it's a lot easier to stitch this on and be more accurate here than starting at that point and going out. Okay, So I'm going to start, and depending on where I'll probably start like this. I'll probably do is stitch down here first. So I'll probably just stitch across and stitch that, and then I'll come along this way, stitch the rest of it, and then down into here. Then what I'll do is when I'm stitching down into these points, all right, there's a lot of bulk right here because you have, think about 4 seam allowances. You have the one from the collar, the one from the lapel, and then the same thing on this side, collar, lapel, all going down to this one spot. So when we stitch down here, we want to make sure all these seam allowances, the collars and lapels, are flipped away and we're just stitching to that point. Okay? And then when we do the same thing on the lapel, we want to flip all the seam allowances up and away and then stitch right into that point. Okay? We don't want these seam allowances caught in there at any time because we're going to want to press them open when we're done. And we want to be able to clip in there if we need to as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now there shouldn't be any ease on this. It should just fit right in. So to make this a little easier, I'm going to start here. Okay, instead of just starting on one side and coming all the way around, I'm going to stitch, because I don't want to start my stitches by putting my needle down here. I want to come to that point. It's easier. Okay, so I'm just going to start about a quarter in on this side of the collar. Right there. And now I can go ahead and I can stitch. Make sure that all your seam allowance here on both sides is flipped down away. Back. Okay, now I'm going to flip this around because what I'll do is I'll be able to stitch around and come right down to the other point from there. So here we go. I'm going to overlap my stitches a little bit. And let's go to the stitch. Now we have a corner here. So we're not going to stitch right up into that corner. We're going to stitch about 1 stitch away from it. Stop, put our needle down, lift our foot up, come diagonally across, like so. Put the needle down, lift up our foot, and then come down the other side. Now make sure we have a seam on the back one. Make sure that seam stays flat. We don't want it folding over and creating bulk. We want the collar to lay correctly. We have another corner coming up here. We're going to stitch up to that corner until about 1 stitch away. Stop. Turn it diagonally. Take 1 stitch. Stop. And then turn it again, and now we're going to stitch. Now we're coming down to the other point. So make sure all that seam allowance in the back is facing down. Same thing with the seam allowance in the front. And we can stitch right into our point. Nice and easy. You might have to walk it there. I'm using my hand to turn the wheel. Right there is where we want to go. And now I'm going to back tap it. There we go. All right. Now let's do the lapels. Here, I'm going to start at the bottom and stitch up into that point. So right here at the hem. corner of my lapel. Stop where I'm 1 stitch away from the point. Turn it diagonally. And then come down. Now, here's my point E. Make sure all the seam allowance on the back and in the front is pushed up so I can clearly see. And then I can stitch right into that point where they all join. And you might need to walk it your last couple stitches right there, and back tack, done. Okay, and let's do the other side. Stitching up the lapel. Coming close to the corner now. Okay, and 1 stitch away right there. Take a diagonal stitch across that corner and flip all the seam allowance up out of the way on both sides. There we go. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim these corners. Got my lapel. I'm just going to reduce some of that bulk in there. I have the collar. Both sides. And now, you'll notice the collar has some shaping. Here's my center back, and it kind of goes around. I'm going to just, through these curves here, I'm just going to clip right down to my stitching line. Not through it. And here it doesn't need too much. Okay, so now we can go ahead and press this. Take our sleeve board here. And we're going to press these open. Pressed right up into that corner. Flip it. Okay, there's my lapel. So I just pressed up the front of my jacket to my lapel. Here is where everything's coming together. We want to make sure we press this good. And right here, so this is my collar now I'm pressing. Seam open there. And now we can go ahead and start pressing our collar. use the ham in here a little bit. It's a little curvier. And we're back to the edge of the collar. Use the sleeve board to get down in there. And now we're coming down the edge of the collar to the notch where the lapel and the collar attach. You can see there's a lot of adjusting and flipping, trying to get everything so you can press it correctly. And now I'll just press up the front of the jacket. It's the side where the lapel facing meets the jacket. Press this open. Okay. Side. Now we're going to flip this right side out. See what we did. You want your point turner. Push out the points. Gently massage those corners out. Don't want to burst it because you did trim away seam allowance, which weakens it. There we go. This lapel. And now the collar. Probably see some of my stay stitching showing. That's okay. That can always be picked out after. And this is just a muslin, so I don't care. Again, stay stitching is very important because we do a lot of clipping. And so if you clip something and you end up having to take it apart, then stay stitching really helps you know how to put it back together, or if you trim something back. And we don't want things to stretch. Okay. The other. Okay, so this lapel and notch look pretty clean. This one, not bad. So now we gotta press this some more. Okay, so if you think about how this works, this around. This is the front or the inside of our coat, but or jacket. What are people gonna see? Okay. When someone's wearing this is going to flip back, okay? This is all the facing side. That flips back and that's what people see is the facing side. Same thing on the lapel. When the jacket's closed, this lapel rolls back like this, okay? So I want to press this nice and flat, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to press this so it's perfectly, that seems right in the middle. Here, I want to make sure this is sitting correctly, so I'm going to flatten it out how it's supposed to be. There we go. And give it a press nice and flat. So, And the reason we press these seams open first is so you don't have to like roll that seam out. Sometimes the seam, when you first sew it, it's kind of inside like this. You have to like massage it. If you press it flat, you shouldn't have to do that. Okay. And coming around the other side. So make sure you get that lapel and collar notch laying nice and flat. There shouldn't be any bunchiness in here if you sewed it correctly. And just press it flat. Alright, we've now successfully attached our facings to our jacket. We're not quite done yet because we need to do the hem facing. But you can just see how this looks real quick. Okay, it lays in there nice and flat. If I turn it around, see what it looks like here. Okay, and we'll put this on the form once it's done so you can really see it. Okay, but it should look nice and clean like that. Alright,